Hey, Daniel. Welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
I appreciate it. As everyone listening will have heard in the intro to this episode, you wrote a brilliant book about the use of cannabis as a psychedelic sacrament, which is titled Psychedelic Cannabis. And I'd like to start by reading a quote that was sort of tucked away in the later chapters, but to me was like the clear thesis of the book. And it is I believe psychedelic cannabis has the capacity to transform our personal and collective crises by providing us an opportunity to develop a solid resilience to big experiences through the ongoing resolution of trauma and the exploration of transpersonal experiences. Now, some people, including myself, when I was first introduced to this subject, might think like cannabis really is that
Mm,
a substance that can produce the same types of big experiences as like mushrooms, DMT, and the classic psychedelics.
mhm.
So, why, in your view, has cannabis been minimized in comparison to these other drugs?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's the most common, and we're used to the skepticism. So I think it's totally normal to be skeptical about this. The more I do this work, though, the more I'm more and more solid in my understanding that cannabis is a classic psychedelic, as potent as these other medicines. There are some traits to cannabis that are unique to cannabis that just as there are traits unique to psilocybin, doesn't make it not psychedelic, right? Let's dive into some of the distinctions and such if you'd like.
Yeah, for sure.
But one thing why it was minimized is that just in the last 5-10 years, I mean, even the last 10 years since I've been working with this, cannabis is a substantially different medicine than it was, in the past. And also legalization has made it so that we can dial in the different effects of cannabis and have some, uh, some capacity to standardize the experience. And so if you're used to underground medicine, illegal pot, right? Like ditch weed from Mexico or from some underground grow that's not very well um, nourished, then you're just not going to reach these psychedelic states with the smoked version of cannabis. With edibles, even those, like pure THC is a full, is a psychedelic. So you can reach them with edibles, but they're often accompanied with pretty significant side effects, most notably panic, anxiety, or severe nausea, so to reach those psychedelic states. So it's paired with a negative experience. And so people don't identify it with as other psychedelics that don't have those. But when you're getting fresh medicine that's well grown, high THC content with a nice terpene profile, meaning like a nice fragrance to it, this medicine is intrinsically psychedelic. And it just required us learning how to reuse it, you know so that's one factor is when and so if somebody smoked long time ago, 10-20 years ago, getting it from an illegal source, it's just not going to be the same thing. You can't research it, or we're just now starting to get into the space of where we're able to research cannabis as a psychedelic. But the FDA approved, DEA approved medicine from Mississippi was so low grade that it wouldn't elicit these results either. So those are two clear factors. And then the other factor is the war on drugs, and cannabis are being mislabeled as a gateway drug for political purposes was really damaging to our understanding of the potential of this medicine. And so we're constantly working to help people heal that trauma and their belief systems around cannabis. Um, and then what I found is that some people don't believe they can go as deep as they can with cannabis, so they don't even try. Like they'll smoke enough to have a deep meditative experience, but don't realize that they can smoke more and have a psychedelic experience. So cannabis is dose specific, just as all the other psychedelic medicines are dose specific. So if you're used to smoking a low dose, like lower dose joint with your friends or whatever, you're just not going to reach these states. The quality of the medicine would be the other factor as well. But it's just dose specific. It's pretty simple. So the stronger the dose, the more likely you are to have a psychedelic experience with this medicine.
So, in terms of dosage, you go into the blends that you make in the
Mhm.
book. So, how important is it to have control over the blend in terms of whether or not you're going to have a psychedelic experience using cannabis?
So, in my book, I talk about creating what we call these alchemical blends of the medicine, and the idea of that is you're mixing different strains that affect different aspects of your experience. And the strains are dependent on what's called our terpene profiles in the medicine. Basically, terpenes are just a fancy way of saying essential oils and fragrances. So think of like lavender as an example, it helps relax people. Well, the same terpenes are in cannabis. So if you smoke a strain with li- um, I think it's linalool in there, lavender, essential oils, then you're going to have a relaxing experience. If you're smoking medicines that have other terpene profiles, like limonene and activating pinene medicines, you're going to have more of an activating, elevating, kind of a more of an upper experience. And so when we combine these strains together, they balance themselves out. So you can tolerate a stronger dose of a high THC experience when you use strains with the right terpenes and such. It's not 100% required, you know, like we used to do before COVID. We would do what we call conscious cannabis circles and invite people to just bring their favorite strain, and people would have full blown psychedelic experiences. Set and setting is obviously a factor, but it's not the only factor. You know, like the medicine is a factor here. Um, but when you get a good blend and you dial it in, what happens is the negative effects associated with a psychedelic level cannabis experience, like the anxiety or nausea, usually disappear. And you're just left with a really awake mind state that's hyper creative, can be hyper visual to the point of like psilocybin, ayahuasca level, even DMT visual like experiences at times. But you don't have any of the like activated physiological effects, the racing heart or panic, anxiety, paranoia that's commonly associated with high dose THC experiences. So not fully required, but there is a factor here that we want to acknowledge that when you do create a right blend, you can dial it in and get the most out of these psychedelic experiences. Um, so it's opposite to the typical research paradigm where you're looking for that one variable and testing that one variable. With cannabis, we're exploring the entourage effect in a like a natural gestalt in the medicine itself. It's not just THC; it's THC with other cannabinoids, with other terpenes that makes like the really amplified experience possible.
So that's what you mean
Um,
by entourage effect, right? Like the mixing of different types of chemicals being greater than the sum of each individual.
That's right. Yeah, so it's not just THC, it's other cannabinoids as well. Specifically, CBN is a major cannabinoid we use with these psychedelic blends because CBN is a sedative and it's deeply relaxing. But when you pair it with a strong dose of THC, you get all the relaxing effects um, without the heaviness or like the dullness that sometimes the indica can create in the mind. And then the not just the cannabinoids, but the terpenes. Terpenes, this is new technology, understanding the terpene profile. So again, like, they like you eat them with mangoes, eat them with black, like smoke it with black pepper. People are putting frankincense oils in their cannabis and stuff. Like people are starting to really understand that these terpenes are like a navigational tool set. So if you want to go into a relaxing experience, you add relaxing terpenes. If you want to go into an elevated creative experience, you choose medicines that have elevated medicine, terpene effects. And so it's like dialing it in. And so with the psychedelic cannabis blends, we just look for an all of the above, right? Like dial it into all of the traits of all the different terpenes, and it creates this entourage gestalt kind of trans cannabis experience. It's something different than just different strains or outside of a psychedelic set and setting. It's intrinsically different.
Can you talk a little more about CBN and the concept of aging cannabis?
Sure. Yeah, so this is something that kind of discovered Unexpectedly, somebody in the very beginning had gifted me some really good medicine, but it was older. It was like from a previous harvest or something, and it felt intrinsically different. There was something deeply soft and gentle and relaxing about it, but it also seemed to amplify the psychedelic nature of it. It's like the visual experience was more three-dimensional, it had more depth to it. And then made another blend with another person's medicine that was some of it was also a little older, and it had the similar effect. So I started to research it and realized that when you age cannabis, like if you have some old medicine somewhere, THC turns into another cannabinoid called CBN. Um, and CBN is normally used as a sedative, as a sleep aid. We have products here that we offer our students and our clients to help them with their sleep. Um, and so typically it's a deep tissue relaxing medicine, and basically you just age it, and there's ways to age medicine to keep it fresh and not moldy and all of that. It's like aging a good wine or something. It gets better over time if it's aged correctly. Basically, it turns THC into CBN. Mostly CBN is used as a sedative, helps people sleep. But if you pair it with a strong dose of THC, it takes, because it's a sedative, it takes all of the anxiety out of a typical high dose THC experience. Um, it relaxes the body in a really deep space, which allows for trauma resolution, which we can talk about too. But it takes the anxiety out of the THC. So a person can tolerate a stronger dose of THC and therefore reach those psychedelic dose levels without the panic, without the paranoia, anxiety, and panic that's commonly associated with like taking too much of an edible or something like that. And so the THC keeps our brain awake. The CBN lets our body kind of go to sleep in a way. So we're kind of enter these lucid waking dream states when you that are psychedelic. The imagery is psychedelic, but it's almost loose, like a lucid dream. Like people can see memories and go back in time and have imaginal experiences that are very vivid, visually speaking. Of course, not always, right? I'm not saying it's always visual, but no, there is psilocybin. Some people don't have visual experiences on other psychedelics too. So that doesn't disqualify it for being a psychedelic. Um, there's something else. And then the CBN does appear when you stay awake. It does appear to have a like a psychedelic effect, right? It does appear to affect the quality of the visualizations. So a full blend would have staged cannabis in it, and this is something I talk about in depth in my book, and how to make it, and how to use it, how to blend the medicine in the right ratios and such. It's not that complicated, but it is, it's a nice how to. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's all written right there.
We were saying before we started recording, I had started to, in preparation for this, along with reading your book, I had tried to implement some of these practices into my meditation. And I have some cannabis that I have been aging for quite a while. So I
Mhm.
started to experiment with blends. And as I understand, and as you lay out in the book, it's a process of finding the blend that works for you, right?
It is, like you can't go wrong with, if you have access to a dispensary and things, is to pick the favorite strains that work for you. There's something like intrinsic about that, like it's your favorite strains for a reason. But so there are certain objective qualities of the cannabis that you want to explore too, like having a certain percentage of THC, if you can make that available. So it's like a both and there. Some people are more drawn to indicas, and some are more drawn to sativas. And so you can dial in your blend to work for you. I use the same strain or the same blend with all my clients, and it just seems like what they need to have happen, because all the terpenes and all the cannabinoids are present. What they need to have happen happens in these experiences. So it works really great. Um, but yeah, And then every location is different, every geographical location, even if you get the same strain from the same seed, or from 2 different grows, same seeds and such, just even the growing um variables make a difference, so it's a really dynamic living organism that you kind of have to develop a relationship with, to talk to it in a way, figuratively speaking, to get to know it and understand how it's going to affect you. you
Mhm. As I understand, you'll be celebrating the 10th anniversary of your practice next month, right?
Yeah, April 20th is our 10-year anniversary, and that was totally by accident. We started our psychedelic harm reduction program through our psychotherapy program when we were first graduating from Naropa, my wife and I. So it's been 10 years now that we've been leading groups and training people how to be psychedelic guides. And then when cannabis became legal a few years after that, in 2014, we immediately started bringing cannabis as a psychedelic into it. At that time, we thought maybe it would be sort of like a psychedelic, or a training tool that would give people an opportunity to have some sort of altered states experience in a training program. But it became really obvious that cannabis was a psychedelic, and that we could develop a whole psychedelic therapy training program around it. And so that's what we've been doing these last 10 years. We're celebrating, just, I don't know if this is going to be out before then, but we're celebrating with some free events online, so people can learn more about that on our website, medicinalmindfulness.org. Be hosting a free cannabis circle. And but given the technology, there's limited number of spaces. So if people are interested, they can just sign up for it. Um, Give it a try.
So, did you stumble upon the psychedelic nature of cannabis by accident, or was it like a slow process of testing?
I think I had the same belief systems everybody else did that minimized cannabis as a psychedelic, even though even before that, I had very clear psychedelic experiences with cannabis. It just didn't click. But my friend John, who I credit for like giving us this idea, he helped me start our first circles with cannabis as a psychedelic. He's like, hey, I know you're interested in psychedelic therapy. Have you ever considered using cannabis as a psychedelic? And I'm like, no, I hadn't really, to be honest. Like I was more interested in MDMA and psilocybin like everybody else. And he's like, well, you do realize it's a psychedelic, right? And I was like, yeah, I guess I do. I just never connected it. And I was immediately intuitively drawn towards blending. Like, oh, if we make us add a sativa to this indica, maybe that'll do something. And so the blending was my contribution, I guess. And so I guess maybe I lucked out or something with this idea of blending. But when we first offered it to our groups, these were friends of mine we were experimenting with, and right as cannabis was becoming recreationally legal, they were jokingly accusing me of putting DMT in the mix, and I knew I hadn't put DMT in the mix, and they knew I hadn't either. These are my friends, but they were like, "What the hell was that, Daniel? Like that was way more intense than I anticipated." And to be honest, it surprised me as much as it did them. So it took a couple of years to get comfortable with like the realization that it was reliable. It was actually a reliable psychedelic, and I could induce these experiences in a way that ensured a certain quality of care. And we built the whole program from that. So it was very obvious at the very beginning, but it took years to grow into the potential. And I still think we're, a fraction of the potential of what this medicine can really offer the world. So it just kept going. Now I have a full-time private practice as a psychedelic cannabis guide and facilitator, and I have an office. I have 2 suites here in Boulder, Colorado, where we have a group space where we can hold about 12 people comfortably in a circle, and I have 4 therapy offices that provide cannabis experiences. Team of 10 people, and a research team that's coming online, and a training teams, so this is like a real thing that we're doing now. Just surprised me as much as it did everybody else, to be honest.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, going back to your practice, what is the protocol, like the set and setting for your patients?
Yeah, so imagine a typical psychedelic guide space. There, instead of a couch or with the couch, we have a folding bed in these spaces so people can lie down comfortably. Music is a huge part of these experiences. So we have nice speaker systems in all of our rooms. And, we're transpersonally oriented. We honor, like, so the word transpersonal comes from Stan Groff's LSD experiments, and it's the study of psychedelics and psychology and spirituality. So we identify with that aspect of the movement. We're transpersonally oriented. So we bring in ceremony and meditation and intention into the taking of the medicine. It's not just clinical, so to speak, where they're provided a substance and ignoring the spiritual dimensions of this work. So if like the stereotypical underground practitioner, we brought in that kind of lineage and identity into this work. So the rooms are meditation rooms with, they're not medically, they're not sterile. They're medical, like some of the medical clinics are. And we have small altars, meditation altars in all the rooms with candle lit and maybe some incense going and such, music in the background. Um, so the protocol itself, though, I do 5 hour psychedelic cannabis sessions, but we can do a 3 hour experience as well. And within that 5 hours, we chat for about a half hour and get people ready. There's bathroom break, and then I invite them to take the medicine through either a mindfulness or a meditation or like a ceremonial prayer, kind of depending on the orientation of my client. And they take a good amount, like I'll always ease new users or people who aren't accustomed to cannabis. They'll just smoke a few puffs to make sure we don't overdo it. But some people will take 7 or 10 inhalations within about a 10-minute period. So it's a good strong dose. And then after that, when they're ready, I invite them to lay down and I will guide them through a gentle body scan meditation to help them kind of reset in this internalized space and get their body relaxed. And then there's something about laying down with cannabis and relaxing the body that amplifies the psychedelic nature of the experience. That's one of the traits that's a little different than other psychedelics. And then the journey itself will last about 3-ish hours long. For those, there'll be a break in the middle where people will smoke more to keep the journey going. But there's a typical cycle for a cannabis dose, smoked cannabis dose. It's about an hour and a half. So we'll do like two of these cycles in a journey where people are invited to smoke again. The journey itself is really dynamic. Cannabis can show up as MDMA like. It can show up as a plant-based and pathogen. And so sometimes they can be very conversational and people are going into their memories and exploring kind of a life review process. And then other times it shows up more like psilocybin or ayahuasca, where the person's quiet and not communicating. And I just play really great music for them as they go on their journey experience and support them if they need it. So some of them are super dynamic, and others are sitting quietly and meditating while they're going through their inner experience. And then when the times when it's like you can kind of see it when somebody's starting to come down from the experience, or when the time's up, we'll gently bring them back, and we'll spend about a half hour to an hour checking in and having some snacks and kind of reorienting to consensus reality, so to speak. And then with our protocol, we do 2 days in a row, which is another little unique difference between cannabis and other psychedelics. And we do 2 days in a row because the second one is often a completion process of the things that occur in the first day. Um, so it's really great. I love it. The secret, the funniest open secret in that psychedelic therapy is already legal in the United States if we use cannabis. And cannabis is legal in 70% of the US population, either under a medical model or recreational adult use legal. And we know how to work legally with both paradigms, so it's the funniest thing, to like I've been working as a psychedelic guide legally since cannabis was legal here and for 8 years now. So I'm trying to get the word out. I'm glad to be on your podcast and other folks to help get this word out.
I'm glad to contribute. It's such valuable information. And as someone who's been steeped in the psychedelic community for years now, I didn't even hear about this until recently. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I definitely am happy to be part of putting the word out.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
in terms of other legal psychedelic therapy modalities, specifically ketamine, how does
Mhm.
your practice differ from that of like the typical ketamine clinic?
No, that's a really great question. I'm glad you're answering it or asking it. So ketamine. So we work with both ketamine and cannabis in our clinical office, and we have, like I said, licensed psychotherapists and as well as a medical doctor that administers the ketamine. We do provide lozenge prescriptions for some folks, and so there's a lot of psychotherapists out there that are providing ketamine experiences with lozenges. So that's something that we offer. However, our specialty is intramuscular injections. Um, and so we identify as a psychedelic therapy center providing psychedelic ketamine experiences under that like orientation. And so with ketamine, we go pretty deep. We're providing breakthrough psychedelic experiences. So that's and the other thing we do is we provide like support. The medical doctors there the first hour of the session, to provide medical support just in case there's ever any issue. We've never really had any sort of like medical issues. It's a really safe medicine, but we provide a lot of medical support in these sessions. And then the psychedelic guide, either a psychotherapist or minister or whoever it is there for a full 3 hours with our clients. And so we've heard that like a lot of ketamine clinics are an hour long or even maybe 2 hour long sessions with no medical support. They're providing low dose intravenous experiences, just hitting the button, leaving the patient in the room, and then coming back when they're in to turn it off. Typically, those much lower doses, they might be psycholytic. Your person's going to feel them, but they're not going to have like ego dissolution and flying through the cosmos experiences. And unfortunately, what we're hearing more often than not with typical ketamine clinics is that if somebody has a breakthrough experience and they get loud or have a breakthrough where they might start crying or vocalizing, that the clinics don't know how to handle that, and so they're shutting the experience down. They're turning the experience off, shoo-shooing them, and sending them out of the trip, out of the experience. And we consider that like a missed opportunity at the very least. It might be traumatizing for some folks to have their experience shut down like that. But from our perspective, if somebody has like a release or breakthrough, we're right there to support them. We know how to handle it. If we normalize it, it's just part of the experience. Sometimes we hear people yelling in our other offices when we're in sessions and stuff, and we just normalize it. So I think that's a real significant difference in how we work with ketamine than like the medical clinical model out there. Um, and I think that's relevant here. The other thing I'll say about that is like cannabis and ketamine, we don't work with them at the same time. That's a legal edge that we just haven't chosen to jump into yet. But ketamine and cannabis are good like a polarity. Um, Cannabis is brings us into our bodies and is a somatic psychedelic. It brings us into relationship with our bodies, whereas ketamine gives us an opportunity to take a break from our bodies. It's a dissociative psychedelic. And so we found that dissociative quality of ketamine and the somatic felt body sense of cannabis really work well together as a therapeutic modality, kind of balance each other out, kind of bring somebody back out of that dissociative state, so to speak. And that's relevant here too.
Yeah, you had brought up like somatic experiences, people crying and screaming and things of that nature. Do you find that
Yeah.
that is something that happens often, or is that like with a certain depth of the experience will you see that?
It's happening more often. I'm wondering if like So when I've been doing this for a little while, and so I have a real strong capacity to go as deep as my clients need to go. So I'm not the check. My capacity to handle something isn't doesn't slow somebody's process down. And the more I found, the more I'm able to hold, the deeper my clients are able to go into. And I think that's it's a factor I'm really noticing and paying attention to here. And sometimes when people go really deep and have an ego breakthrough, ego disillusion, or breakthrough release, or finally get that defended part to let go enough to finally surrender into a process, it can get pretty loud. Like I've had clients wail, I've had clients sob and cry, and I've also had clients roar, like they find their deep inner and personal empowerment and they roar like a lion. So it's just like this vocal deep release. And I've heard it though with my other team members and stuff, but it's not that common, but we create a space for it, we normalize it. And we just my team, my staff here, in their offices, they know how to handle the energetic discharge of hearing somebody in another room have a big release. So we've learned to work with that. Cannabis, in a way, because it's either more somatic, or we're smoking. There's our clients are smoking it. One of the primary differences between cannabis and other psychedelics is that there is still a sense of agency, personal agency that's retained. And so I've never had an experience with cannabis where somebody's just totally out of control. And that could happen with, say, psilocybin or even MDMA or the DMTs. So I've never really had someone like just out of their mind, out of control. So even when they're vocalizing or screaming or yelling or whatever it is, like it's intentional. It's like, I need to say this, I need to get this out for my healing. And they choose to do it. And so there's a felt sense of safety with cannabis. That this is, even though this is big, it's still in the realm of this person is safe and in control. And I've learned to really appreciate that with this medicine. You know.
Yeah. So you have a training program. So how do you toe the line of, or how do you teach someone to not interfere with someone's big experience? Because I know that it's got to
Mhm.
be hard. And from the experiences that I've had with other people, while we were taking psychedelics together or whether I was sitting with someone, it's really difficult when you see someone having a hard time to not want to jump in and, give them a hug or help them out in
Yeah, I'll
some
fix
type of
it.
way. Yeah. So how do you
Yeah.
balance that?
I think through experience, I've just learned to trust the process, and that they need to go through whatever it is they're going through for like the release of healing. So in transpersonal psychology and Stancroft's work, he came up with this idea called the holotropic principle, which is when we remove all obstacles from ourselves, we human beings naturally turn towards healing and self-actualization. And I've just learned that is what that looks like in the world is just a real broad range of what would be considered normal. So it might just look like them laying there, or it might look like they're like literally shaking, like they're having seizures, or it might look like they're having an emotive release. So my general assessment is this person hurting themselves, right? Like I'm not going to let somebody hurt themselves. Are their hands moving around in a way that they might hit their hand on the wall or hit themselves, like, and so instead of stopping that, I would just help direct the energy of their hands and ensure that they're safe. Are they rolling around and are and making sure they're not going to roll into something on the floor or roll off the bed? So that's my general assessment, is I will let them stay in their process if they're not going to harm themselves unintentionally. The other thing is like, and this is, I have an eye for this now, is like, is this person totally overwhelmed by their experience and needs support, or and help titrate, like are they outside their window of tolerance so much that it's scary to them, like, so I'm going to be in that space. not fixing or trying to shut it down, but letting them know I'm there, helping them, reminding them to stay regulated and to breathe in their bellies, to explore, to be with whatever it is, but at a distance that works for them. So I'm just helping them stay regulated. And if a person, even if they're having a really hard time, and I'm like sitting there listening, paying attention to them, and they're like fully present and engage their process, I'll let it unfold, because this is what healing looks like sometimes. This isn't just psychotherapy. This is something else. I mean, it's like I don't identify as a psychotherapist anyway. We want people to have these breakthrough experiences because that's what it takes sometimes for them to finally let go of whatever it is they've been moving through their whole life, or whatever mindset they've been stuck in. Sometimes it takes some energy to release. So, um, and then you got to remember also, like, we're not just tripping with our friends here. We're not just at a concert. We're not worried about the police coming and like interfering and all of that. So the set and setting is a major factor here. Like, I have a doctor down the hall. I have two people on staff outside if I needed support, and that person knows it too, so they feel safe enough to go into it. So it's very contained. It's not like if somebody were having big moment at a concert, I would be like, okay guys, we got to get you out of here. Like, I'd be like playing buffer for security and all of that, and reassuring everybody around us, and making sure they're not getting tranquilized and stuff, or held down by the medics. This, I don't have to worry about any of that stuff, so we just let it unfold. you know
Yeah, because as you said, I think it is really important that someone is able to have the experience and that the experience can conclude itself as opposed to
It's-
being stopped. That can
oh
be
yeah.
traumatic. Yeah.
That's a super, so that's a major factor here. And again, Stan Groff talks about these things too. But if you tranquilize somebody in the middle of a breakthrough experience, it kind of freezes them in that space, and it can be detrimental and re-traumatizing. It's one of the reasons we quit working harm reduction at festivals, is we just kept seeing things that we wouldn't want to do otherwise, and the harm that it was causing. So I just had to like step away from that work. At this point, like, I don't recommend people take psychedelics at festivals and stuff, or take low dose or quarter dose, or just smoke cannabis or something, because of some of the harm I've seen in people being held down or tranquilized in big breakthrough experiences. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
So, and this is what's happening in ketamine clinics right now too. Like, and it's important to name this piece, and that these ketamine clinics, hopefully, will get the training they need when they realize what they're doing and stuff. And that people, like, freak out or breakthrough is not the same as out of control or unsafe, and that those are the moments that are like the most healing. For most, like, that release is the most healing. So why would we shut it down, out of my own anxiety of like, oh, I don't want other people to hear this, it might sound weird, you know
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Going back to your book for a minute. I forget who introduced me to it. Might have actually been Joe Moore. And he
Uh-huh.
said that this book is or should be a staple on any psychonaut's bookshelf. And
Oh yeah,
I didn't
that's a
fully
nice
understand
compliment.
that. Yeah, it is, isn't it? And I
Hmm.
didn't fully understand that until I really got into your book and realized that it's not just about describing how cannabis can help with therapy
Hmm.
methods. What it also is, it's a guide for meditation, it's a guide for any psychedelic experience. And I thought that was
Yeah,
one of the most valuable portions of your book was describing exactly how you can have these experiences through different modes of meditation. And that the body scan has been so amazing for me. I've been using that
that's
specifically
great.
and it's been fantastic. So can you talk a
the
little
re-
bit
the
about some of
recording of it.
those?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so what you're talking, we have a media page on medicinalmindfulness.org, and on that there's some recordings, so you can download or just play a body scan meditation off of that site. Um, so you smoke a little herb and do a body scan. The cannabinoids and the cannabis are gonna relax the body more than they would normally without the medicine. And if you smoke enough, it's gonna create an inner visual experience where you can literally see inside the body, and engage tension in a way that's real skillful. Yeah, so you're right. We talk about cannabis there. One, I wanted to introduce cannabis as a psychedelic. I think that's really important. And these practices didn't come from just working with cannabis. They came from my experiences and my work at and training at Naropa as a mindfulness-based facilitator. I've worked with underground practitioners and apprenticed with them. So I learned a lot of strategies and skill sets and such to help people navigate these spaces. But then I also learned working with cannabis that agency and our capacity to stay lucid and engage with skill is something that can be cultivated and developed using cannabis. So, like inner navigational mindfulness techniques to promote healing, transformation, self actualization, exploration of whatever that inner realm or that psychic realm is, the collective, whatever word we use, collective unconscious, spirit world, whatever. Those are skill sets that can be developed. We don't have to just surrender into the space. We don't have to just let it happen to us. Cannabis taught me that. And then the other thing what I realized the more I worked with cannabis was that those skill sets get translated to working with other medicines. So you learn how to fly, so to speak, with cannabis. Then you take psilocybin, you have more agency in the psilocybin experience to engage it as well. And so all that, like how to set up a space, the initial rituals and ceremonies to create the right mindset, the completion ceremonies to tie it all up, how to handle difficult experiences. It's all in the book, and those aren't cannabis specific. You know, they're useful for all of the journey to skill sets. So with teaching it, I've worked hard to like, okay, how do I teach this? How do I simplify it? How do I create structure that people can live into and grow into? It's not just about taking a medicine and laying down and hoping for the best. Like, what if we could do more than that? And so that's what the book is about. It's like all the things you can do and skill sets you can cultivate using cannabis as a tool. All of it comes from working with other psychedelic medicines, and all of it translates back to working with other psychedelics. So just to give a little bit of context, and my book was written a few years ago, so some of this is still being developed, but the book talks about something called cannabis assisted psychedelic therapy, like using cannabis as a psychedelic tool. But that's a specialty, that's part of a larger modality that I call mindfulness based psychedelic therapy. And that's a umbrella for working with all of the psychedelic medicines. Like, and we're working on creating retreats on, okay, here's how to bring these practices in working with psilocybin. Here's how to bring these practices in working with DMT. It's all, we learn the foundational skill sets with cannabis, and that those can then translate when you have the right training, to work with a particular substance. All of them are relevant, you know. So I really like the way we work with it. It's structured, it's simple, and it's super effective. Reliable. It's totally reliable.
Yeah, I found the book was, in my opinion, perfect for somebody who is just beginning in the
Hmm.
to get these kinds of thoughts and to navigate these kinds of realms, but it's also just as useful for someone who has already been, in
Hmm.
huge psychedelic experiences, but wants to hone their abilities and
Hmm.
hone their so-called use of psychedelics skillfully, which you do go into in the book. So could you just kind of talk a little bit about some of the skills that you would need?
Sure. Yeah, so we play with this. So, you've heard the saying set and setting, right? Like that's like almost a dogma in
Yeah.
the psychedelic community, right? Central importance of set and setting. So mindset, right? What's as a factor in your experience, setting, where you do it, right? And you want to have some congruency with your mindset and the setting. But they completely forgot about adding skill set to this and to this saying. And I think back in the early days with psychedelics, people didn't like the only skill set that we had that people talked about was surrendering and allowing the experience to unfold, right? Like that's it. Because it's so overwhelming. Like these are like back in the day, like these early practitioners were taking like 1,000 mics of LSD and stuff, right? Or heroic doses of psilocybin. Like that's all you could do was fully surrender into it. But surrendering and allowing, accepting, that's just one skill set that we can bring into these experiences. Um, Another one would like so this is so I work within a model associated with the cardinal directions and mysticism. This is based on alchemy, transformational alchemy, but also I've studied with indigenous communities as well. Uh, s- but it's okay to like what we do is we bring it into skill set development paradigms so that we're not culturally appropriating, images and symbols. So we come from a skill set paradigm. So one would be surrender and allow, right? Just fully accepting that this is what's happening, and I'm turning towards it, right? And that's congruent with the holotropic principle, right? Like it just let it unfold. It's going to heal. It's going to help you heal and wake up. But the other one would be the opposite, which is like focused awareness, right? Like, and so being able to stay focused in these inner spaces is a skill set that can be developed, maybe more akin to like Zen meditation practice, where you're keeping like a point of focus. And something significant about that is like focus awareness allows you to stay with the process long enough for it to complete and resolve. Whereas if you're constantly dancing and flying around and have no focus, it's a great experience, but there's not a lot of resolution. So there's something about this staying focused capacity. Another one would be letting yourself experience excitement, joy, and creativity, curiosity, play in this inner space. There's something very like psychedelics and cannabis are totally interconnected with creative functions, art, music, but also problem solving, like creative problem solving. So there are techniques and strategies you can do of like, I'm going to come into this session with a real specific question that I cannot figure out the answer to. And something about that curiosity and play and exploring can just elicit the answer to the problem. And then there's this whole other thing of discernment, which is another skill set that can be developed of like understanding the psychedelic experience itself, understanding the phenomenon, being able to map out where you are in the experience instead of just being like spirit world, right? Or imaginal space or hallucination. It's like there's actual structure and like location within these psychedelic states. And so bringing in education and training on what is this and where am I at in this allows for us to have like okay, if I'm here, then I have these particular strategies and techniques to engage this particular terrain that I'm in, right? And then we have, I mean, and then breaking down those certain capacities, then we go into like, well, there's certain strategies and skill sets we can do to heal trauma, like real specific strategies. And so bringing focus awareness to attention in my body while relaxing all around it, being curious and remaining in contact with it and understanding and discerning that what's emerging is a holotropic principle and I can accept and relax and allow this process to do it. All of a sudden, there's like a whole new realm of resolution of past injuries and things, and that spontaneously emerge that just wouldn't if you hadn't brought in these ways of being and skill sets. So psychonauts can learn these skill sets and do them on their own. And then if when you have a guide, they're there to hold the scaffolding of those skill sets to support their clients and engaging what is emerging. So being able to fly, inner visual, like having a capacity to have inner visual experiences, these are all skill sets and you can develop them. It's fascinating. Surrendering into ego disillusion, what if that's a skill set that can be developed and it's not as scary anymore? It's just a transition that occurs. So I think that's a major factor here. And then just to go back to cannabis is again, you can learn these skill sets with cannabis. There's something about agency and cannabis that's unique as a psychedelic. And then from that, you can have more agency with the other medicines. Maybe not as much, right? Especially on a high dose thing, but you can cultivate that. I really learned to appreciate that
Mhm.
in
Yeah,
these practices.
speaking of other substances that you're involved with, I understand you're involved with the DMTX program, which is a
Yep.
research program for extended state DMT experiences. How far
Yeah.
along has that gotten?
Yeah, COVID knocked it sideways for a little while, but and we were gonna head to Costa Rica for some DMT retreats, and that all got canceled. So we just hit the pause button for a little while and kind of started working behind the scenes to keep it going. So DMTX, it's a model based off Andrew Gallimore and Rick Strassman's work. This idea of, DMT is such a fast experience. Like, is there a way to stabilize and remain in that state for longer periods of time? And Andrew Gallimore came up with this idea of using infusion pump technology to do that. Excuse me. So, you can check out that info on dmtx.org if people are interested. We have a new video that we made that's going to come out soon that Andrew Gallimore narrated, which is extraordinary. Super excited about what he created for our program. So we're about to start a fundraiser for that. With that, and we have our whole team is set up. We have the medical doctor, we have the clinical practitioners, we even have a sketch artist for someone to come and help people sketch out their experiences. We have a writer, to help with the trip reports and stuff. So we have a full team. We have allies in Jamaica and Canada, and are now coordinating with DMT manufacturers, like legal DMT manufacturers. And so right now where we're at is we're navigating the export import process. I have a legal team helping us with that question, and we're going and under research paradigms, it's possible that we'll be able to import the medicine, or we'll work with other research teams to import the medicine to Jamaica. And so that might happen next year. It might take a little longer. It's a major unknown. And so what we're doing in the meantime is we already have access to natural DMTs, and that's legal to work with in Jamaica. And so we're starting to initiate Changa smoke DMT retreat experiences for both training purposes, people who want to learn how to facilitate, but also just folks who want to have a couple of DMT experiences. So it's engaged, it's fully active, and we're making big steps towards implementing it. My feeling is all psychedelic medicines are becoming more and more commercially available anyway. DMT is no exception to that. So it's really a matter of when it'll happen, not if. And so we're just going to keep cultivating the protocol, building it, building what we need to do. And when we're able to access the medicine legally, it'll just land and we'll do it. So I would say we're maybe a couple of years out at the most, but of course there's factors, global legalization and other things, other factors that are bigger than us. I'm
And when I
excited.
hear Andrew Gallimore talk about this process, he tends to use a lot of mystical overtones, and this is what is really intriguing to me, is that it seems that the philosophy behind DMTX is really to go into a DMT experience and be able to stay there and map out
Hmm.
the landscape and sort of understand maybe what these
What's really
entities
going
are,
on?
or yeah,
Yeah.
and where you're going, or if you can
Yeah.
have shared experiences and things like that. So is that accurate
Yeah.
in the philosophy of
Yeah,
the
all of that's so the big question is this real? Is this just happening in our heads, or are we able to tap into a reality that's bigger than us and objectively real? And can two people in two different DMT experiences have a similar enough experience that it's like, you know, a little more obvious than not that something else is going on than just an hallucination in someone's head? The problem with, just smoking DMT or injecting it, like, again, Rick Strassman started the whole psychedelic renaissance with these programs. They're super short. They're like the peak is 4 to 7 minutes long. So as soon as you, and it's overwhelming, like these medicine experiences are like, like very overwhelming in their intensity. So as soon as you start getting your orientation, that, remember that focused awareness, capacity to surrender and allow the experience, all that takes time. And as soon as you land in it, you're coming out of it. So that entity you were speaking to that just showed up to tell you the secrets of the universe, or that new terrain that you land in and you want to look around in, it's fading away as soon as you land in it. And so it's really hard to have an extended conversation with that entity to see if it's useful in some way. Rick Strassman talks about this in the DMT and the Soul of Prophecy book, and that like comparing DMT experiences with like religious visionary experiences. And his general assessment was it was the person's capacity to stay focused and made it less random. So we're teaching our psychonauts or DMTX psychonauts how to stay present in these states. The other thing about extended state DMT is that we can dial the intensity down. So we're looking for like a threshold breakthrough experience and stabilizing that point. And that might be less than, but the problem with a threshold in an injection or smoking is that it lasts maybe a minute or two. It's just not that long. But if you can stabilize it at that threshold point, then maybe a person cannot be overwhelmed by it and then have some time to look around. So that's the big debate. Dr. Gallimore is a firm believer in this idea that we are contacting like a higher dimensional reality. And my personal experiences with DMT point to that as well. Rick Strassman talks about how do you assess something that feels more real than real. When you're adding, it's like a higher dimensional perspective. So when you're adding extra spatial dimensions to something, it just feels beyond real. Um, so so can we develop an experiment that can prove the objective reality of it? Like, what if we have two sessions going on in two different rooms and we're trying to get two different people to communicate together? Is that something we could do? The other question, I'm curious. I like these ideas, and I think it's fun. I'm like really inspired by other dimensional reality and this idea of other entities. My personal worldview creates has a space for archetypal and spiritual dimensions that are beyond us. So it's not outside my worldview. But I feel pretty grounded in this too, and I think even if we can't prove it, my big question is, can it be useful to us? Can we benefit from it in some way? And so that points to like advanced scientific problem solving questions. Like, who cares if an entity told you how to solve this big problem, or you were able to look at it from a different perspective and solve the problem? Like, if we can come up with like a world transforming technology that can help heal our planet, or help us understand something scientifically that we're struggling with, I think that's just as useful as understanding the nature of reality or whatnot. So that's kind of where my focus can is this useful? What happens when you put somebody like a scientist, like a PhD level scientist, working on a complex problem nobody's solved like has been able to resolve in the world? What happens if you put somebody into that experience with that background? Talk about a mind state, right? A mind setting that um mindset that can be really beneficial. Like our iPhones came out of LSD experiences. The nature of our genetic structure came out of like working with psychedelics. There's a lot of scientific breakthroughs that have occurred using psychedelic medicines by scientists. What if you could make a protocol around that, and you just induce like scientific breakthrough after scientific breakthrough? That's kind of where I'm going with it you know
Yeah, and it does feel when you're in those experiences that it is a landscape that you can navigate, and it is something that
yeah,
is quote unquote real or realer than real.
yeah.
I've heard the late Kalindi Iyi, who, if people don't know who he is, he would take like 50-gram dried doses of mushrooms, and he would explore DMT realms very, very deeply. And he spoke of creating communities within the DMT realm, which seems quite interesting to me. And he said there were people out there currently that are traveling to these realms in extended states, and they're creating like community park type places for everyone to go and meet. So it does seem
Uh-huh.
like that is a potential possibility for something like the DMTX program to explore.
I mean, I've heard stories of people having second families in like DMT states, like indigenous communities. Like, they have family members that they return to again and again and connect with. And I always have, like, it's been a while since I've taken DMTs because it's such an evocative experience, but I have the same entities show up and they flash the same color patterns to let me know that they're there, and they feel like family. Like it's like a returning to a spiritual family. And again, that feeling of more real than real makes it super lucid. It's like hard to discount when you have such a deeply meaningful experience. So yeah, these are really legit questions. It's like, can we create a machine that can help us actively and reliably enter a new realm of um, aliveness, and that space is objectively real and still exists even when we're not aware of it. um it's a legit question, and there's like, it's not just me, Daniel, who smokes pot all the time, talking about these things, right? Like, these are like MD, PhD level research scientists who are having extremely esoteric conversations about this. You read Rick Strassman's Inner Path to Outer Space. They're trying to outline the biological mechanisms of multidimensional communication, like they're really smart people exploring these questions. And Dr. Gallimore is probably one of the smartest people I know, and he's like, he thinks we're tapping into like Kardashev level 6 civilizations, and I think there's something to that. Like, what are the implications
Yeah,
if that's true?
I've always thought that's where the aliens are in the DMT realm. That's where I've seen them at least. I've never seen a UFO, but I've seen some aliens, or alien type entities or
Oh
beings
yeah,
within those states.
yeah, and like they're like super smart, super. And a lot of them, like some of them, like like this objective reality is like not all of them feel safe or want to hang out with, but a lot of them are super cool beings here to support us in our evolution, and they're like showing us secrets of the universe and showing us secret like resolution of like real big problems in our lives that are helpful. And so, what if that's real? That's big news. Have you heard of the Fermi paradox? Like this idea that the universe is so old and so expansive. Why don't we have access to, or why aren't we seeing, why aren't we seeing, shit, what's the word I'm looking for? Not symptoms, but evidence of extraterrestrial civilizations.
Hmm.
Like we should be able to see that, and like, why aren't we, is a big question. And Andrew Gallimore and I've thought about this as like a solution to the Fermi paradox is we're just looking in the wrong direction. It's through these molecular interventions that allow us to give direct access. And it's not just like, this is the crazy thing with DMT, it's not just direct access on occasion or randomly. It's like every time people are
Yeah.
making contact with these beings, and like you said, developing relationships with them,
Hmm.
it's fascinating.
It is. It really is. I definitely want to be respectful of your time here. So, as we wrap up, um, is there anything else that you'd like to get out there? Anything else you want to cover?
Gosh, like the psychedelic movement is huge and of constantly evolving, and it's the future of society, I think, in a way, and that we have a lot of work to do to bring in safety and accountability, but it's worth the effort. And so for those of you in your audience who are interested in becoming psychedelic guides, we have a whole training program for it, and that you can start working as a psychedelic practitioner legally in a lot of the world right now, without having to wait for psilocybin or MDMA to come online. So if it's okay, just share some websites for people to get connected to. Is that all right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So psychedelicsitterschool.org and that's Sitters School with a like plural sitters. And then medicinalmindfulness.org. And you can search these and they'll come up. But, we really inspired by this work. We identify as members of the transpersonal orientations, spiritual orientations of the psychedelic community. But we honor the research and the medical safety side as just as much and the creative side. So we have a whole community around this work. And so if people are interested in finding a tribe that's actively engaged and trying to do it in good, right relationship, I just invite everybody to come check us out, you know. And psychedelics are coming, they're already being legalized and things. So now's the time to dive into it. I work with a lot of people who are transitioning from other professions to help them with this work, and so I have a specialty around that now. And then on our center side, I just want everybody to know that like we really can help with severe PTSD and trauma resolution and help people reset their whole systems to uh, finally get back on track. Like if generally people come to us when they get stuck in psychotherapy, and we're able to break through those areas of stuckness, and they can keep their healing work going. So I get to see transformation all the time, and it's such a blessing and a privilege, and truly honored to be in that space with folks, and that this is all I've got, right? Like this is what I do in the world, and I want to share it with people. Yeah.
And thank you for sharing it. And thank you for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.